Approaching Buddhism. Chapter 1. Understanding Life. Humanity has long been sunk in confusion over wisdom and ignorance. Infinite, unknown domains surround us, concealed by the darkness of endless space, and despite the progress of civilization, humanity has not yet fully understood the riddles of the cosmos. Of all these riddles, the most difficult, the most irritating, the most pressing, both for individuals and the society as a whole, are those pertaining to our own predicament. Who am I? What is life's origin? How can one be at ease in life? When people die, are they forever extinguished, or is there life after death? If after death people no longer maintain any sort of life, then of what consequence are one's good and evil actions? If there is life before and after death, then where does life come from, and where does death lead to? Life, death and impermanence. The answer to the question of life and death is intimate and personal, for it speaks directly to our most fundamental desires and fears. We are all born and fated to die, and in the face of death, all the world's happiness becomes cheap and tawdry decoration. When we calm our hearts and look at this one issue of impermanence, our life seems to be caught in the middle of bottomless blackness. All of our fears in the world originate from the fear of dying. All people, whether they recognize it or not, necessarily have some intuition of this. From our fight or flight response in the face of danger to the psychological fear of graveyards and corpses, everyone can observe their fear entrenched in the depths of his or her consciousness. At different times in history and in different cultural contexts, wise men and women have pointed out to us that mankind's fear of death is a universal, eternal and fundamental anxiety. From an evolutionary perspective, this has been purposeful because our strongest instinctual desire is to stay alive. We have been a radically successful species, but the price of success has been consciousness of death. We all know that at the end, death comes to us all. When death comes, we are thrown into an unknown abyss. Indeed, there may be nothing more frightening than the fact that we cannot know for certain what happens to us when we die. We go through this life attached to a particular self-identity. My name, my status, my lifestyle, my family, my friends, my work, my property, my intelligence, my ability. We base our sense of security on all these frail supports that, at the instant of death, are all completely swept away. When we confront ourselves honestly, we meet an utterly bare self, an unrecognizable self, a worrying stranger. Is it any wonder, then, that we cram each waking moment with trivia, distractions, and pointless tasks to ensure that we need not ever face this stranger? From the first, we live under a fictitious identity in a world that is ultimately unreal as a fairy tale. In addition, we are continually intoxicated by our passions, a state which can be compared to haphazardly building a poorly planned and substandard house on a foundation of sand, no less. We meticulously guard ourselves, but no one can control every aspect of their lives. Still, towards this unattainable end, we pile care upon care until one day illness or catastrophe wakes us with a blow. Then the imminent approach of death shatters our delusion and forces us out of our hiding place. The average person's attitude towards life is to maximize pleasure and to forget about death as much as possible. Death, however, does not forget about us and strikes abruptly, without warning. Some people say, we all must die. It is not some great ponderous thing. It is, in fact, quite natural. I don't have any problem with it. Surveying death from a distance or talking about it in the abstract is not frightening. It's a bit like calmly looking at a tiger in a cage at the zoo, where it cannot hurt us. But if we were in the mountains and suddenly encountered a tiger, would we have the same composure and detachment? When we're generally confronted with our own death, when we finally meet the tiger on the mountain, just one look and both legs go weak. Whether from natural disasters, war, robbery, accident or disease, every day we hear news of death. Shakyamuni Buddha tells us, human life is the space of a single breath. The meaning of this is that person's life is brief and frail. If inhale, breath does not follow exhale breath. It means the end of life. This is the most important example of what the Buddha frequently mentions in the sutras, Impermanence. The Buddha once asked his disciples, how long is a human life? One disciple replied, human life is the space of a day. The Buddha shook his head and said, you do not understand. The second disciple replied, human life is the space of a meal. The Buddha again shook his head and said, you also do not understand. The third disciple replied, human life is the space of a breath. The Buddha said, excellent, excellent, you understand. 100 years is 36,500 days. In the blink of an eye, each and every one is swept away. Thank you. Namo Ami Tufo.